So let's talk about the lessons that we have learned or perhaps should have learned from these elections. And from this, I'm joined by the former DA leader, Mr. Tony Leon. Thank you for your time today and thank you for joining us. There are a lot of trends that have been observed throughout this entire election season. And one of those trends is the behavior of the voter when it comes to specifically the African National Congress. And perhaps one could look as well at the independents and how they are being treated by the voter. What do you believe are some of the trends that have come out of this election and the lessons that can be learned from them?
Well, I think the meta trend from where I sit is actually the most disturbing, and that is that 2/3 of South Africans have either passively or actively given up on the democratic process. You look at the percentage poll and you look at the low number of registrations of potential voters, constitutional democracy is in trouble when around only 1/3 of the eligible voters actually cast a ballot, or even fewer than that. So I think that's the one aspect. I think the second aspect, which is obviously the headline of this election, is that for the first time since 1994, the ANC is vulnerable, and it has gone below the 50% psychological and electoral barrier in the country and has lost control, or outright control, of every major metropole except for Mangaung and for Buffalo City, East London. So in the major cities and even some of the more significant towns in this country, the ANC no longer rules the roost. And I think that's going to have profound implications, both for the political economy going forward and certainly for the outcome of the 2024 election, which I think we can now say with some degree of confidence will no longer be the foregone conclusion that every national election in South Africa hitherto has been.
You touched on your observation from your view of constitutional democracy being under threat and being in trouble. Do you believe that South Africans understand the power of the vote, understand how democracy works? Because in order for us to even move forward, 2024 and even beyond, one has got to start with the premise of having a voter or voters who actually understand what it is that they're doing and how they actually impact their own futures and their country.
Yes, I agree with that as a sentiment and a principle. But I do think a lot of the voters weren't just saying, it's a long weekend or it's a public holiday. I think they were saying very profound and disturbing to us. They were saying, I have voted in multiple elections, nationally, provincially, locally, and my situation's either not changed, my community's actually in worse trouble than it was. We see through that in multiple municipalities across the country. And so what's the point? And I think when folk give up on the possibility or prospects of democratic change, then that's a problem. A friend of mine who's a very eminent constitutional lawyer said to me, how can we really have a durable constitutional democracy in a country where effectively 43% of the job-seeking population has no work? And I thought that is, there's something in there. And I think this election result, dramatic though it's been in parts, is a consequence of that.
How would you rate the maturity of our democracy?
Well, you can argue it two ways. You can say that the fact that so few people now relatively have gone to vote means that it's stagnating. On the other hand, you could say, well, actually, even the passive people who didn't vote were making in their own way an active statement which had profound consequences. On the other hand, look, going back before time began, when I was leader of the DA, when DA did very well in the 2000 local government elections, the percentage poll was only about 48%, and then yet in the next national election, which was in 2004, it went up into the high 60s. So we mustn't over-dramatize the events on Monday and have some sense of perspective, and you can't extrapolate a local election to a national election, but I think some warning signs are flashing, in my view.
Could it be, Mr. Leon, that by not voting, in as much as those who are not voting think that they are exercising a choice and are communicating in one way, that they could end up with what they actually didn't want in the first place? And so they actually have made a choice, but it's not the choice that they thought they were making, because they're ending up with what they really don't want.
Oh, absolutely. Look, a lot of the more dramatic results on Monday, as we've seen before in previous elections, happened because of very, very low voter turnout in some areas and relatively high voter turnout in other areas. And, you can't be certain, because we can't put ourselves at all into the minds of millions of absentee voters, what they were thinking and what outcome they desired. But absolutely, this old magical formula, which has been of help to opposition causes since I was around, called differential turnout. So opposition strongholds go and vote in greater numbers than townships go and vote, or government supporting areas, you get a very, very significant different outcome. And to some extent, or to a large extent, we saw that on Monday. But on the other hand, I think that, and this is not a constitutional point, it's a political point, I think the problem for the ANC, which preeminently is a party of power and patronage, when actually you seem to be losing power hand over fist across 7 out of 9 provinces, people will say, well, they're not so invulnerable, and maybe we can finish the job in 2024. So I think it will actually enthuse non-ANC voters to go and vote, because they can see that their votes can actually make a difference. For ANC voters, of course, the ones who stayed away, they might say, well, the party's in real trouble, and we better make sure they stay in power, so we better go and vote next time. So I think it can work two ways.
In this election, the Democratic Alliance seems to have lost some sort of ground. What are the challenges that have been experienced in the party internally that have perhaps led to some dismal performances in some areas?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not privy, and I don't want to place in the internal councils of the DA, because I haven't been leader since 2007. But I think the results were a mixed bag for the DA. They were pretty much written off a lot before the election. They were going to do very badly. The polls suggest about 16-17%. And using that as a perspective, they got out of jail in this election, electorally speaking. Of course, people will say, but given all the circumstances, with the ANC falling below 50% everywhere, most places, and the economy tanking and the electricity blackouts in the election, you should have done better than you did. So, you can argue the narrative several ways. I think the DA did enough to consolidate itself. It's still a party, the only party in South Africa, other than the ANC, that got more than 20% of the vote nationally. But it's got challenges, and how it behaves, reacts, and deals with the situation between now and 2024 will determine whether it stays where it is, which is where it's been for quite a while, or does it go forward, or indeed backward if it does the wrong things, because you can't take your voters for granted. And they did have some recovery in some areas, and they did have some fallback in other areas. I would say, objectively speaking, taking off my hat as a person who spent most of his adult life building the DA, I would say they have consolidated, but now they need to move forward. And I guess what happens in the next few weeks with these coalition discussions and how they behave in them and after them and in the councils where they govern. I mean, I would say one of the bright spots for the DA is the new mayor of Cape Town, Jordan Lewis. I know him pretty well. He was a young activist a long time ago, because I was lead the party. And I thought he was a person of exceptional qualities. And this is when he was 18 years old. Now that he's 33 and mayor of Cape Town, I really think he's going to be a very dynamic game changer, and not just for Cape Town, but for what you can do with a committed local politician with a wider vision. So, I think there are some people coming up. The new chap in Ngubeni, that's Howick and Hilton and surrounding areas, seems a very impressive bloke. I think he's got a lot of vuma, as we say, and I think he might do so. I think there's some personalities emerging who are not yet known to the public, who I think will add depth and talent to the DA offering.
Mr. Thami Ngubeni, former leader of the Democratic Alliance, thank you for your insights this afternoon.